Society of Southern California. This is Esteemed Thursday, and I'm your host for this evening. I'm going to talk about the underpainting. And first and foremost, I want to thank everyone, all the board members at Pastel Society of Southern California for continuing this program, which I think has just been crucial to having a camaraderie among us artists and being able to share about the lush medium of pastel. So I will do a bit of a demo here shortly, but and again, I join everyone to join the Pastel Society of Southern California on this Esteemed Thursday. You'll find us on psscwebsite.org or on the YouTube, which is a little bit. Can you tell us? It's it was the handle, right? Is it? Yeah, I'm not quite sure what the handle is.
Pastel Society. California, I think, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I'll go look it up and put it in the chat.
And you can always go onto our website, again, at psscwebsite.org to look at our calendar and you see what we've got going on. So again, I appreciate everyone being here. I've been painting with pastel for 10 years now, and there's still so much to learn. But if anyone knows me, like Margie, because I've known Margie, gosh, Margie, we're going on 20 years now.
25.
And so, 25 is it?
Yeah.
And so, you know, I dabbled with pastels in my illustrations when I was doing, working on vellum. I was doing color illustrations, or, you know, so I kind of played with them, but it was always with mixed media or playing with turpenoid, some kind of solvent, whatever. And to this day, I still do. But pastels became my medium of choice about 10 years ago. My very first workshop was with Diana Ponting from Canada, and wonderful, wonderful artist. She was teaching at the San Clemente Art Center. Is that right? It was a great art store. I think they closed a few years ago, and it was a great place to take a workshop right close to the beach. Anyhow, she came down. She likes to work on La Carte, and La Carte is a beautiful surface that is made with, I believe, cork fiber. And sorry, my eyes are watering. I'm going to have to write this down. But anyhow, it's a beautiful paper. Unfortunately, the only thing it can't do is take wet media. And I really like to work with wet media. I've taken, since her workshop, I've taken, workshops from Richard McKinley. I've taken workshops from Lisa Ober, which that workshop, I believe, was in 2016 or 2017. And she was, she was one of the instructors that really, really got me more, you know, I mean, she just inspired me to really dive into the world of pastel. So, I mean, they all did, but every instructor is great in inspiring each student in their own certain way. So, and now within the 10 years, I'm now teaching, and I'm teaching basically a lot of the techniques that I learned or honed during my illustration years. So I've been working as an illustrator for over 25 years, and I just love playing with mixed media. So a lot of what I do now is as of late, actually, I'm working more like a sculptor, where I'm looking at this big block and how can I chisel it down to the point that I want to. And of course, I love doing realism. And but by working this way, it allows me to say, okay, I'm going to stop here and still very much enjoy the painting for what it is. I like to work the whole piece together now, you know, whereas I was working from left to right, or I was working 1 inch at a time, and that's all well and good. But again, at this point, I'm kind of changing it up. So I want to show you a little bit of a few techniques that I've been working on. And so I work in many methods. One of the methods that I really like, and one that I was using quite a bit, was that of the Dutch masters, where they were doing an oil transfer. And in my case, I was also doing pastel transfer, where you do your cartoon drawing, your line drawing, and then you transfer it. You do the drawing on heavy paper, and then you rub the back of that paper with oil paint and some solvent, and then you let it, you rub it and you get it all nice and even, and then you transfer that onto your substrate. Same thing with the pastel, where you take the pastel and rub it really nice, and then you go ahead and transfer that. Now, probably can't see it here very well, but here's a panel, because one of the things I really like to do is I like to test a lot, and so doing the underpainting allows me to experiment and visualize the piece in a very short amount of time. In other words, if I feel like the underpainting is fairly successful, then it gives me the confidence to continue the painting. And if it's not, then I say, okay, I need to rethink this, and I leave it alone for a few days, revisit it, or just don't finish at all. I move on. Again, because there are some artists who they have been working with pastels much longer than I have. And I love to see their confidence, like Dawn Emerson, and of course, Linda Moody, who I took her workshop as well quite a few years ago, and her underpaintings are just absolutely gorgeous. Let me see, are we still good? Okay, I don't know why my computer switched. I thought maybe I got cut off. So anyhow, what I like to do is I like to experiment with panels. And this here is an ampersand hardboard panel, and they spell that HARDBORD. It is a raw panel, and I really like to use the Art Spectrum Color Fix Primer. And so there you can see how I'm experimenting with marker, I'm experimenting with different pastels, I'm looking at the different blacks, the different grays, and this is actually a transfer. So this is rose gray, excuse me, not rose gray, this is blue haze. I don't know, you guys can barely see that, right? It's blue haze. And so unfortunately, what happened with this one is that I sanded the layers too much. And so now I don't even think I'll be able to paint with pastel. And I could play with the clear ampersand primer or the golden pastel ground, but at this point, I might end up doing this as an oil painting, because oil painting goes on the ampersand primer really, really nice. So that might end up being an oil painting. But let me show you a couple. Let me show you if I can share my screen. Can I do that? Can I? Let me see. Share content. Yeah, it'll let me. So what I'm going to do is I'll just show you a couple of images, and I'll explain how I did the underpainting. And let's see. Excuse me. Did I press spotlight? Am I showing up okay? Because again, this is my first time using the iPad. Okay, it says only the host can share in this meeting. So if you wouldn't mind letting me share.
Yeah.
What's that? Any questions so far?
Chris, I think you're the host, so you can.
I think you should be able to share now, Otto.
Okay, let's find out. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, thank you. All right, so let me see if I can, let me do the screen here. Okay. Okay, it's coming in. All right. Can you guys see me? I'm having an issue here.
Oh, it's starting. It's turning.
Yeah. Okay, you know what? For some reason, it's not going through.
Okay.
Let me stop that. Okay, let me go back to, let me just see, I might just have to do photos. Let's see if it lets me do that. Okay, let's see if I can go to it might not. Okay, that's too bad. I had a little, let me see if it goes, here we go. Thank you. All right, can you guys, oh. It's not letting me. Okay. All right. Let me try one more time. Let me try one more time. All right. Well, you know what? I'll just show you guys the photos. How's that? Can you guys see anything? Yeah. Can you guys see that?
See you.
Oh, just me? Okay. Let me, it's not going to be in order then, but either way, I was hoping that I could show you guys the little presentation I have, but I'm not sure why it's acting up. Let me see if it does it. Okay. So it's not going to be in order, but
There we are.
all right. it's something. All right. So this one here, if you guys recall, and you guys again can probably go onto my website again. I had a little presentation, but this one here is called To Love and Light. Now, this one is on, I believe it's on UR 600. And with this one, I had a lot of fun with this one in that I just decided to put quite a bit of pastel on there and just kind of get some of the forms, some of the values. I didn't concern myself with detail and just said, you know what, I just want to get those big shapes. And then I don't know if you can zoom in on it. Is that working? It is, huh? You guys see? Okay. So do you see all of that texture? That is all just water that I spritzed on there because I wanted to give the background some texture. And so I was just having some fun with it. And you can see how I was just, again, the eucalyptus is not even in there. I decided that I was going to paint that over the actual, over the background. So again, this is one of the ways I was experimenting and I had a lot of fun with it. And I've done a couple paintings like this since. The only thing again is that, what's that?
I just muted someone.
Oh.
There was a background noise.
So the only thing with this is that you have to understand that, again, most of you do, is that by having the pastel like this, whatever pastel you put on top is going to mix. Now, one of the ways that I solve that was that I actually can take my airbrush and I can spray the alcohol on there, and then it sets everything in there and I can paint right on top of that without disturbing it. So it sets the colors in by using the alcohol through my airbrush. Of course, I wear a mask, but I use the 91% and it sets it in there quite nicely. So this is one of the techniques I really enjoy using. Here you see a couple of steps. This was, I'm trying to remember what I worked on this one. I think it was a prime panel. But again, sometimes I get quite tight, and this one I just loose, just putting some watercolor down. And this, again, this is watercolor. This is Hydrus. I love Hydrus watercolors. If you haven't used Hydrus watercolors, I absolutely love them. They are super highly pigmented, and they just work beautifully. They flow really nicely. They come in little bottles. I believe they have like 2 ounce or 4 ounce or something like that. And again, those are called Hydrus watercolors. And so you can see the beginning of stages of that. And then again, just I continue painting with the watercolor, just adding a little bit of detail. And then once that's done, I start putting in the detail with the pastels. So that's another way of doing the underpainting. This one, if you've seen it, this is camellias. Now, you can see underneath there, and this is pretty much I'll be painting today, where I just take my drawing board and some paints. These are not the best paints, but they're decent. They are pelicans, and again, they don't compare to Hydrus. I really love Hydrus, but they work great. They work great for what I needed. And this was on UArt. This is an 18 by 24 UArt 800. And I really enjoyed doing the underpainting with this. Now, if you've seen the painting, and maybe I'll bring it up in just a little bit, you'll see this is really refined, quite detailed. But many a time, versus working little section by section, I really like, again, working the whole piece and just getting it all down, getting some paint under there. Now, I'm the type of artist who doesn't really enjoy pits, seeing the pits of the paper underneath. So I tend to do an underpainting for that reason. Plus, the other thing is I just really enjoy painting, and I love having some color, some tone, some value underneath, so that and because the pastels play so nicely on top of watercolor or acrylic. Now, if you're going to use acrylic, when I use acrylic, I tend to use UArt 600 or 500, something that's a little grittier, because of the polymer in the acrylic. It becomes a bit slick. So you have to be careful how much acrylic you apply on there. This painting is Solace of the Foregone Seasons. And I'll see if I can show you some finished pictures of these. But this one actually was in the email. And so you can see how on this one, I started, I believe this is a 600. I started just using a pastel pencil. Specifically, I use the Faber-Castell. I love this, their pencil, which is, oh gosh, where to go? It's a Faber-Castell, it's a walnut brown. And I'm trying to remember the name of it, but it's a walnut brown, and it's just it's a really great pastel pencil for the underdrawing. And it's specifically the 1122-177. It's by Faber-Castell, and it's the walnut brown. So I have plenty of those for doing the drawings of the piece prior to painting. And then there I am playing around with my airbrush. And wow. This, and so I'm going to play around with that today too, just to show you. So the great thing about having this tool, this is, first of all, this is the airbrush is the very first tool I learned on. I was like maybe 14 or 15. I saw a couple of young guys working a fair. I can't remember where, but
that's I was with you.
No. This is I was 14. I was 14. Oh. No, I was 14. And so this is quite a while ago, years ago. And so these guys were painting these T-shirts, and they were just there was a line, and they were making money hand over fist. And I was like, oh, I want to paint like that. And so never having taken an art class, I started learning about, I went to the library, wanted to learn about the airbrush, when you could go to the library. Now you can find everything online. So I wanted to learn about the airbrush and the airbrush techniques. And so I saved up to buy myself an airbrush, and it was the first tool I ever got to learn on. So I became quite proficient in it. I ended up painting leather jackets at a store in my early 20s on Sunset Boulevard. And so I just became really fond of using this tool. And so now I'm back at it, and I used it throughout my illustration years like crazy. And so I decided, well, you know what, let me see if I can use the airbrush using the tool and using acrylic or watercolor as an underpainting. And sure enough, it works really great on UArt paper. It works excellent on your paper. Again, not just as to use acrylic or watercolor, but also for spraying alcohol to ensure that the pastel sets, the layer sets, and then I'm able to work on that without having to mix any of the underlayers too much. So it sets it in there quite nicely. This, the other thing about the airbrushing an underpainting is that it gets really quickly. You'll be able to get the forms, and I can, within a couple hours, I have all the forms in, and I'm ready to use a pastel right on top. So again, a lot of people say, why do you go through so much trouble? Well, because I really enjoy painting, and I just love playing around with stuff. It also tones any light paper. Lately, I've been putting a mid-tone gray on my UArt. I have tried pastel matte. I'm not very good at it just yet. I'm still experimenting with pastel matte. I know a lot of realists like to use it, but I still have a lot of experimentation to do with pastel matte. Anyhow, this is a piece that I just recently finished, and again, you can see the watercolor layers underneath, not extremely tight, fairly loose. I just wanted to get something under there. You can see how this one actually did a transfer. I did a transfer, a pastel transfer on this one, and this is where I started working on the background. You can see that this is an 18 by 24 UArt. It's mounted on a panel, but this is from Dakota. Now, I'm going to zoom in on this just a little bit so you guys can see.
Quick question, Otto.
Yes.
Christine Whitney wanted to know if you ever use oil.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. You ever use oil washes as an underpainting, and she also
yes.
Have you tried Lux Archival?
I have not tried Lux Archival. I have felt it, and it's a bit rough for my liking. But I know like Lynn Addig loves it. I know that who else? Jacob Aguiar is using it, and he really likes it as well. So I'm not particular to it. I tend to go with slightly smoother paper. And so I haven't used it, but I have felt it, and it feels a bit rough. So I won't knock it down too much because again, I haven't used it. And but so many artists do love it. So, but what I wanted to share was that in this image, you can see those striations. Do you see them? That is a UArt 800 mounted by Dakota. I don't know if anybody else has been having this issue, but if you buy a panel that's from UArt directly or manufactured at their plant, you're not going to have that issue. So whatever Dakota is doing to mount this paper, it's leaving those striations, it was a bit tricky to hide that. So some people don't mind it, but for me, I just I try to build up my layers to kind of hide that. So anybody been having that issue? Anybody? Dakota mounted UArt paper?
Maureen McHale said
Maureen,
it as well.
Okay, yeah. And so I have a panel up here that I'll show you in just a second that's actually UArt manufactured and never had that issue. Okay, so here, again, you can see I've already started developing some of the grapes, and you can see how, building up that texture in the background. And you can see how some of these striations there, but, and this is all being done on top of the pastel transfer, which I set in with workable fixative. So I do tend to use workable fixative in the very beginning layers, but never in the finishing layers. I never spray my pastels. That's just not me. I don't like using the sprays when I get to a certain level of finish. And I think, and then this one, I'm starting to have a little more fun with. This is for my paintings where I want to be a little bit more expressive. Again, this is the alcohol wash. There's some artists who just excel at this, and so I want to play around with it a little bit more, and I'll probably do some of that with this piece. But this was, you guys can't tell what it is, but it's actually on my Instagram if you guys want to see it. It's a poinsettia, and I use the Rocher reds primarily on this. I just absolutely love those reds. I don't know if anybody else has used those reds, but they're just deep and rich and gorgeous. Those reds are super expensive, but I don't know who else has reds like that. I've gotten Terry Ludwig reds, and they don't quite compare. I did use some Terry Ludwigs on here, which they have some excellent darks, but those Rocher reds are just absolutely gorgeous. So let me go ahead and let me see if I can actually get to. Let's see that. I think that's about it. So let me stop and share. Are there any questions? And then I'll switch over.
Yeah, I have a quick one.
Yeah.
Which is on the one that you had that striation you didn't like.
Mm-hmm.
Would it help to have gone in with a pan pastel?
I do have some pan pastels. Now, I tend to use pan pastels as the beginning. I use them for the beginning stages sometimes. I like them, and I do like using some of their tools, but they only go so far for me. And I know a lot of artists like to use it on pastel mat, which I haven't really delved into that, but I want to experiment more with pen pastels because I'm finding that using it as a beginning layer and then setting it with alcohol and then reapplying it right on top is working really, really, really nice. So, but I just like painting, and I used to paint quite a bit in oil, and I mean I paint extensively with acrylic for Disney, for their parks, for the murals. So I'm very familiar with acrylic and what it can and cannot do. And so I think that's why I really enjoy playing around with acrylic and watercolor and the wet medium and everything that you can do with it prior to painting with pastel. Again, a lot of artists say it's just redundancy. There's no need for it, but I say go with your temperament. Do what you love to do. Don't let people mock it. If it's really what you really enjoy doing, go for it. Experiment. Again, I'm always experimenting. I'll show you with the piece that you guys. Can you guys? Oh, what's going on? You guys can't see that? Hold on a second. Okay. Sorry. There you go. I don't know if you guys can see the other image. I've got my phone. Where'd it go? Can you guys see that? There it is. It's where it says Otto Sturcke. You can see my phone. That's UART 800. I'm doing a white peacock on that, and I'll move over to that in just a bit. But that one I'm using willow charcoal. So what you see is the beginning stages. I'm using willow charcoal, and you can see there's a pie pattern on there. And what I did is I just kind of split the paper to 12 by 18. I split it in half, and then I just went from corner to corner. Now, if you're going to be using UART paper, don't take it for granted that it is the exact measurement, because it's very unlikely that it is. It always seems to be off. But if you're using the premium mounted panels, they're pretty spot on with the measurement, not the paper. This one, I believe, is like 15 and some, excuse me, not 15. It was 12 by 18. So I think it was shy of 12, like 12, and then I mean, it's not perfectly rectangular. Measurements aren't spot on. So sometimes you can get almost up to a ½ inch off. So before you take it to a framer, just know that they may not be exact when you're mounting it to a panel. So I tend to cut them and measure, make sure that they're squared up before I start painting on them. But again, when you're talking about the premium panels, they tend to be pretty spot on. All right, so any questions? And I'll move on over to the easel. Any questions regarding some of the process, the pictures I showed you guys? Anything?
Can you explain again that you have it on UART paper, and then you transferred your drawing, and then are you going it over with the willow charcoal, or did I miss it up there?
No. Okay, so there are different ways to putting the image on the UART paper, and I tend to work a lot on UART paper, but I also love the La Carte, and I'm starting to experiment with some of these other papers, but what I tend to mostly use is the UART and the Art Spectrum Color Fix primer, priming the ampersand panels. The way I tend to transfer my images: 1, draw it by hand; 2, using the grid method; 3, I like to do the cartoon on paper, right? Get it all really nice and tight, getting that line drawing, what they call the cartoon. And then I do either an oil transfer, or I do what's called the pastel transfer, right? Where you rub in the back of the paper, and then using a ballpoint pen, I trace so that the image is on there. You could use Sorol. Sorol tends to work really well too, which is like a carbon paper that you put between your substrate and your actual drawing. And you draw. A lot of oil painters do this method using the Sorol. Or in this case, like what I just did, is I just use willow charcoal. So anybody know the difference between willow and vine charcoal? Why I might be using willow versus vine? Anybody?
It's softer?
Willow is, yes, willow is much softer. It's much easier to erase. And excuse me, and I'm using it to create not only line work, but also to create forms. And the beauty of it is that you can use a kneaded eraser. Or what I like to do is I like to use my tri-tip eraser, the General's tri-tip eraser, and it just erases beautifully. So again, this tri-tip eraser works really, really nice on UR paper. So it takes down the pastel, it can take all the layers down. If you want a sharp edge, you can take a ruler or paper, you can get some really nice sharp edges if you need to. And so I use willow charcoal because I can rework it and rework it and rework it. And lately I've been really enjoying doing the drawing and structuring, again, kind of working like a sculptor, just, just kind of chiseling away. And another reason why I use willow charcoal is because if I start drawing with a pencil, I tend to be quite tight with it. And so I'll find myself doing the details when I shouldn't be doing the details. I want to really structure it, get the forms down, get the shapes down, and play with the underpainting. And then if I need to tighten it up, yeah, I'll take a pencil to it, or I'll take a really sharp walnut brown pastel pencil and I'll draw on that. But sometimes I just like to use, like you saw in one of the images where I did the excuse me, was the Solace of Foregone Seasons, where I used two types of pencils. I used the walnut brown that you saw. I did all the organic objects in there. I used the walnut brown, and then for the tin metal, if you guys notice that, for the Mexican tin vase, I used the number 2 pencil, or the HP pencil, something like that, and so I was able to get all those nice details in there. So sometimes I just use a number 2 pencil, sometimes willow. So it all depends on
Can
what
you
I want.
get willow at any art store?
Yeah, you
can anywhere. I mean, I haven't. I've only bought green charcoal. I'm not even thinking. Oh, willow.
Willow charcoal.
Oh, it's called willow. Okay.
Yes.
That's the difference. Thank you.
Yes. So it's willow, and this is by Talents. And so what I'll show you is,
Is it softer than vine? Did you say?
Yes, softer than vine. So the vine charcoal tends to have more staying power, right? More staining power.
Okay.
And this is
Disappears.
the willow charcoal. You get different thicknesses, but this is it's just I tend to sharpen the point just a little bit, but I don't. Yes. I'm not getting extremely detailed with it. There's a purpose for that, and I'll show you why. So let's step on over. It's already past 7. So I hope that you guys can see this. There's a portrait I'm working on. Oh, that's a good point. Let me show you that. Let me see if I can turn this camera around. Give me just a quick second. I'm going to turn this around. Okay, so here is a portrait that I'm doing, and it's from an older photograph, and there's still a lot of work to be done. And let me see if I can move this. And this is on a primed panel that I did with ampersand. And so there's a lot of work to be done still, but you can see the underpainting there, and you can see how you can see all the layers that I'm laying on there. That's acrylic actually underneath, and it looks really gritty in this camera. But so there's still quite a bit of work to be done on this portrait, but it's from an old photograph, maybe from JCPenney, and so I've got a lot of work to do on that. But on here, let me see if I can move this over. Sorry. On this is UArt, and what I want to show you first is the 2 types of UArt that they have. And so one of the reasons why I like to do an underpainting is for this reason, and I'll show you just a sec here. So, all right, let me show you real quick. Hopefully you guys can see this okay. Let me switch my camera around. All right, sorry. All right, I'm very limited in how I move here. I'm using
hey, Otto,
yeah.
Do you want to spotlight the fixed camera on the artwork, or do you want the spotlighted, the one that you're?
However people feel comfortable. I mean, you can actually do a split screen. So do you guys know how to do that? Where you guys can actually, there's a little bar on the left that you can slide on over. So you can actually do that. I'm going to, for anybody who's viewing, do you guys know how to do that? I remember you could do that.
I think you can only do that when you're sharing the screen.
Oh, I see. I'm sorry. Okay. So what, can you guys zoom in? However you guys want to do it. I'm trying to figure out, because I'm very limited as to how I can do this.
Let me see what it looks like on the other camera. Hang on.
Okay.
That's kind of more stationary. Maybe we'll leave that on Spotlight.
Okay. Okay. So that's my phone. Okay. Got it. Okay. Thank you. All right. So let me show you guys real quick where I leave my willow circle. All right. I'm gonna have to get a new piece. Let me get a new piece. All right. So the image that I'm using is this guy right here. And I just printed it on plain paper. I don't need high detail. I just want to get some forms from it. I just want to see the big picture, so to speak. So, and what I did, again, I laid out, you can see how it's got the pie marks here. And so one of the reasons I really enjoy working with willow charcoal is because I can use just the willow charcoal. I'm just sharpening up my willow just a little bit. All right. And so one of the reasons I like doing this is I'm going to show you just like, for instance, on the eye. So I want to show you how, because the value is quite dark. And so if, you guys see that okay?
Yep.
And then it's got the lid on top. And so, again, if I get the pencil here, let me show you. It's not real sharp, but if I get into the pencil, I really start, I feel like I get into the detail a little too much, too quickly, right? Where I can actually just, and this is just a regular 2B. This I tend to use for the next stage, but I'm trying to be a little bit more expressive with my work. And so what I like to do, you can see how, again, you can really get caught up in some of that detail. And so I will say this for later, but let me show you why I like to use the willow charcoal. The reason I like to use the willow charcoal, for instance, let's take this area right here. We've got the little bit of that shadow right underneath, right? I tend to like to work with the willow charcoal also because I get to play with the shapes and start designing some of those shapes. And one of the beautiful thing about this willow charcoal is, I'll show you here, is let's say let's say I just go too dark on the value, right? Just a little bit too dark on the value. I can actually take a chamois cloth like this, right? I gotta remember. And this works really well for smudging, or for instance, if you want to do just a little bit of a value shift, you can actually really take that down. And if I'm squinting, I can see how this is darker underneath. And then I have two different types. I can use different types of erasers. This one here is a Factus BM2. And then the one on the smaller one is the Mono Zero, the Tombow. And the beautiful thing about this is that you can actually start erasing some details if you wanted to, right? So you can restructure, you can start restructuring your forms or picking out highlights, however you want to do it, fairly quickly. So you can actually keep playing with this to get your value structure in, or getting the values right. Like for instance, the eye, if I just wanted to get lighter with it, you can see how you can take your erasers and really get some detail if you want to go that far, right? So it erases beautifully, by the way. But you can get these subtle shifts and subtle tones with willow charcoal and then come back in either with a pencil or, because I'm constantly chiseling away, trying to get the form right. Now, you could transfer this if you wanted to. But I'll take a few hours, a day or two, whatever, however I feel, to get the form right, get the shapes right, or design the shapes to my liking. But by not using a super sharp pencil, I'm able to play just a little bit more. Not be too concerned in the beginning with every little detail. Can you guys see that okay?
Yes.
Sorry. All right. So you can actually do your whole drawing like this and then put the pastel right on top. Just getting some of these shapes down. So, I mean, really, you can spend a day on this if you like to, and just really, really hash it out. Again, this is on 800, so you can use pastel pencil. The willow charcoal goes on there really nicely. Okay, so that's one way. Now, one of the reasons I like to do the painting is because sometimes just looking at a blank canvas or a blank sheet of paper just can be a little bit overwhelming. So, oh, I can't see that. It can be a little bit overwhelming. So, I tend to some kind of tone on there. Now, do you guys want to see a little bit of watercolor, some alcohol? Would you like to see how I airbrush some tone in there? What would you guys like to see?
Watercolor.
Someone said watercolor.
Watercolor, okay. So do you want me to airbrush it or brush it? So
Love to see you airbrush. That would be
right,
interesting.
Okay, this is the airbrush. This is the Iwata Eclipse HPCS. It's a gravity feed. So obviously gravity will feed the paint into the airbrush. Now here is the paint. That's the Hydrus Fine Art Watercolor. This is burnt sienna specifically. This is really, really beautiful color. Now, hopefully it didn't dry too much. Sometimes I have to put distilled water in there to reactivate it if I don't use the paint very long. So let's see, it might be a little bit thick. I may have to just dilute it just a little bit with a little bit of water. Bear with me. All right. That should do it. Now, one of the things I really like to do is there it is. I have a lot of different stencils here, airbrush stencils and stuff, and you can use, just about anything. You can use a ripped up piece of paper. You can use these guys, these curves, these French curves. So, you can use, you name it. I have a ton, the ellipses. So you can get real creative with some of these, I've got just a bunch of stuff. So, and those again from my illustration days. So the thing with this is I'm going to move this aside just so I have a little bit more room, is that you can really have fun with airbrush. You can splatter paint. You can use alcohol to splatter on as well. So it works really, really, really well, really well. You can do this. Oops, I got to turn this on. And what I'm using is a CO2 tank. if you're not familiar with the CO2 tank, is that unlike a compressor, you'll never get water coming through it. So it's completely dry. Now, since I'm using it in my studio, I tend to use it very low because CO2 tends to deplete your oxygen. So if you're using it at high levels, then high PSI, you might feel yourself short of breath. So that's one thing you just want to be careful of. Oh, another thing too is I want to show you is that I want to show you the generals. So you can see how you can erase this down quite nicely. So if you want to take the time to get things really nice and clean, really sharp, that's your call. But it works really, really well. Okay. Now, the airbrush. I've got the paint in here. You guys can see that. And I always like to kind of shoot on the side just to see how it's coming out. You might need a little bit more PSI, pounds per square inch. You can see I can just take, right now I'm not even putting paint. What I'm doing is I'm blowing off the excess fine charcoal. Do you guys see that? I just blew off a lot of that excess charcoal. Do you guys see that? It just got a little bit lighter. No? Okay. Anyway, here we go. You're gonna hear you can hear the airbrush quite a bit. Now, sometimes if I get overspray, that doesn't matter. It really doesn't, because what I don't mind some of that color fusing into the edges, or if this is a refined illustration, then maybe I would be a little bit more careful. But because I'm putting pastel over it, it's okay to have some of those softer edges, having the color blend into each other. Again, like a sculptor, I'm looking for big shapes. I'm not really trying to get detailed. And I can mix black into this, or I can do a few layers. So again, I'm not being particularly picky with, like, for instance, like this line there. And besides, watercolor always dries a little bit lighter. So I end up using a few layers. Like I might take some black, some green, and just play with it. Down here, you can see some of these feathers that are blended into the background. So I won't get too sharp edge with those. Any questions?
Well, Christine said she uses lift out quite a bit. Kneaded eraser gives very interesting edges and shapes.
It does. Yeah, the kneaded eraser gives you some really, really cool edges. Now, if I let this dry, and I've got my blow dryer handy, because sometimes I paint with an airbrush in one hand and the blow dryer in the next, and the other. Again, I just want to have fun with it. I don't want to get too uptight. And again, this is just one of the ways. Let me show you a few other ways. And all these values, these tones here, you can actually get that in there as well. And you can do this with pastel pencil. You can do this with paint, like I did in camellias. But sometimes using an airbrush just gives you some quick, and I'm already out of paint.
Otto, at some point,
Yes,
can you show us how you put down pastel and then use water with the airbrush on it? Alcohol with the airbrush?
Yes,
to set it?
absolutely. Let's do that. Let me just rinse on my airbrush. Always got to rinse it out. And I'm going to turn on the blow dryer real quick. just to make sure this is dry. Okay. Sorry about the noise. Okay, so laying down a little bit of that pastel. For instance, let me see, where do I have? You know what? Let me use some, because somebody asked about the pan pastel. So let me pull out the pan pastel. So I've got my pan pastels here. I'll use a brown. And you know what? I'll just take the dark eye. So I'll take this brown, and maybe I'll mix with a little bit of black, and I'll show you. Again, I'm chiseling out some of these shapes. This is 800. Again, UART 800. Any questions, you guys?
You know, I think I like the fact you're using that tool with it instead of just sponging it on, which I've done.
Well, it feels a little bit more like a paintbrush, and so I'm really fond of it.
I like that aspect of it.
I tend to be a little bit of a mad scientist in my studio, so Margie knows. She knows. I'm always experimenting, just to see what I can, I feel like 10 years is really nothing, when it comes to trying to even get to know a medium, I mean, I don't know, at least not for me. I feel like I could take a few lifetimes to really understand all there is to know about art mediums.
Yes.
But what I have learned, I do journal it. For instance, when something feels like I sanded it way too much, or the acrylic got too heavy, I write all that down. I journal just about every success and and failed attempt at creating art. And so that
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. What happened?
Well, Christine just said she uses a paintbrush with pan pastel, also mixing with mineral spirits, just like
yes,
paint.
absolutely.
I like that idea, Christine. That's great.
Yeah, it's again, you can do just about anything. Now you got to be a little careful with the 800, right? Because it's much it's not as much tooth, but also 800 doesn't blend as nice as the 600 or the 400, just because it's again, it's a finer grit. But okay, so I think that's enough for that. And so let me show you how I do the alcohol. Okay, I don't want to spray too much because I don't know where I left my mask. So I'm going to take 91. That's this guy right here, 91, because it dries super fast. And I just wanted to hit the surface and set. All right, so let me test over here. Also, the reason why I like to have an underpaint is because, of course, you guys know simultaneous contrast is that when you put something down, of color down on a light surface, it's going to look quite a bit darker. And the perfect example of that is this. I'm going to take, let's see, I'm going to take this medium blue, And you can see, if you guys can see on this section here, this is the UART 800 dark, UART 800 sanded. And I'm just going to do a swatch there. You can see, let's see if the camera shows up, because iPhone doesn't transfer that very well. Can you guys see that?
It's a little bit, if you could go over a little bit to the left. Perfect.
What's that? I
Yeah,
can't
that
move my
looks
phone.
better.
I can't, yeah, I can't move my phone very much, but
Right
can
there.
see it.
yeah, can you see it? And so let me do another one. So this is a dark brown, and I'm gonna isolate it so you guys can see. There's the brown, right? Now let's shoot over here. Right? Look at what happens just because, again, simultaneous contrast. Look how much darker it looks here. And look how much, it looks redder here, doesn't it? Because it's surrounded by this grayish black. And so it's making it look quite warm in comparison. I mean, it's just odd. I hope that's showing up okay on that.
It is.
And so again, this is the reason why that I tend to have a lighter hand when I'm applying pastel and color. And so that, I think that's why I'm more, I like the finer papers, because I'm building it up slowly. I don't tend to use as much pastel as, let's say, maybe Tony Elaine does, or Don Emerson. So I'm building up some of these layers. And again, I don't use as much pastel. I tend to weave color versus laying just colors right on top. And again, maybe a lot of that just has to do with temperament. So and so this is why, again, I enjoy playing with some of these experiments or experimenting with all these pastels. But anyhow, so here is the again, it's got a little bit of pigment in there, but this is 91% alcohol. And what I'm doing is I'm just spraying it onto and it's atomizing, but it's almost drying instantly. On a warm day, it definitely dries instantly. So I'm going pretty heavy. I mean, I'm going on there, not even necessary. Now, when I tend to work on sheets of paper, I try not to get too wet. I use the alcohol method much more than I would doing a bunch of washes. When I do washes, I tend to work on these guys. Sorry, I've got my big red face in there. I tend to work on these guys, and this is the UART. Let me show you guys the UART premium mounted boards. Okay, so this is a 500, and this one here is I'm working on these again. This is airbrushed. This is airbrushed and using some watercolor on top of that. That's just the very beginning stages of that. But these are really, really sturdy, really rigid. I love it. They can take a beating. You can wash them off if you need to and start all over again. Really nice. Obviously, you can't do that with these sheets of paper, but that's why I tend to use alcohol or these lighter types of washes or using the pan pastels. And so now I've got that set. And so let me just give it a quick shot of air, hot air here. Okay. And let's see here. Sorry, gotta hang this up. Okay. So now I'm able to lay down, right? There's still a little bit of smudging, but that's mostly probably the willow underneath, but it sets it pretty darn good, right? So I still get a little bit. I mean, I could probably put another layer of the alcohol on top, but it still does a really nice job of setting it in so that if I need to put another layer on it, it's not going to muddy it up very much. So, I tend to think a little bit like a chess player. Now, I try to think a few moves ahead. Now, this here is a 513 black at the Giraud. And you can see so you can see how, sorry, I got a text, I'm sorry. You can see it's pretty dark. Now there's a 513 that's even darker than that. And you're not gonna see the difference until you really put them next to each other. But I like to sharpen these guys up. And then this is where I can really, if I wanna get that back on them, you can just really see how lush these blacks are. And I haven't found, if you guys know of a richer, darker black, I have not found one yet. I mean, these are just superb blacks.
So you said one was the 513, and what was the other number, Otto?
513 and the 526. The 526 is their, I believe they call that the, oh gosh. Again, this is Giroux's carbon. One is a candle black, and I think the other one is a carbon black. Okay. But you can see how, you know, just I can start chiseling out some shapes. You can see I can start chiseling out some of those shapes. And again, I'm not going for detail just yet. I'm just kind of getting those bigger forms. Right? So if I want to lay down a little bit more pan pastel, I could to get some color. Sometimes, like even when I lay down the Giroux, I'll do a little bit of, you know, I'll lay down a layer, and then I can actually, you know, you can alcohol wash it. You can, if you want to get some texture, you know, or if I wanted to really get some texture underneath, I would start laying down my watercolor. I'll, you know, I can splatter it, do whatever. You can, you know, just have fun with it. You know, a perfect example is Drew Struzan, who did a lot of the Star Wars posters. He did the Goonies posters. He did a lot of posters. He loved. Now he worked on crescent, but crescent board, cold press crescent board. But he would really lay down the acrylic, the watercolor, and then he would do what's called a water masking, where he would, you know, lay it down flat on the table, and he would put a lot of water on it, and then he would, you know, splatter some paint with a toothbrush or an airbrush, and then take a paper towel or a rag and just lift up those water droplets, and he created a water mask. And he did such a great job with it. He just, you know, it's really nice. So you can do some of that. I've been experimenting with some of that on here. But again, look at this black. You see how different it is from the pan pastel. Let me do the pan pastel one more time, just so you can see the difference in some of these blacks. So this is the pan pastel. I'll put it right here. I don't know if you can see that. It's almost like a gray, right? Well, it's not showing up very well in there, but on my side, my end, I can see how that's just grayer. It's got a little bit more gray, you know, it's gray. And you know, but the other thing too is they just blend really nicely. I mean, you can take this tool and really blend that out nice. This tool can help you soften up some of the edges. You can also use it to draw with. So yeah. All right. Next up, let's do, let's see, what else? What other techniques should we use here? Let me use, like what I did with camellias, where I just took some round brushes. This is a very good brush, but I took some round brushes, and then just taking a little bit of watercolor or wash. I've got a Masterson Stay Wet palette here. You guys familiar with that? Masterson Stay Wet palette. It's got a sponge, and you put some paper on top, and it keeps the paint wet. You can actually work with acrylics or with watercolor for weeks. So it's really, really nice to have. Let me show you if I can put that in on camera. This is a Masters of Stay Wet palette. So you can see how it's got a sponge underneath. You just wet it, you put the paper on top, and put your paints right on top of that. It works really, really well.
Otto, Michelle wanted all the participants to know that for anybody participating in the program tonight, there's an extra discount from Pastels, etc. It's in the chat.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Michelle has a wonderful variety of those of the Giroux. And so yeah, please, if you guys want any of the Giroux, reach out to Michelle. All right, sorry, I'm mixing some paint to put on my palette. Sorry for the delay. All right, so you can take a round brush, if you like, and this is some hydrous. And if you want to spend a day, I mean, sometimes I take up to 3 days, depending on how big the painting is or how detailed I want to do it. But I can take a round brush like this, and again, I'm always experimenting with it, and take your time developing the underpainting. Now, in French, Michelle knows this better than I do, but it's called a ébauche or ébauche. If you guys are familiar with that term, it's basically an underpainting, a light underpainting that many artists used to just get the painting going, you know, to have an understanding of the forms and kind of like where they wanted to go with this, right? So, you know, you can use this technique, and you don't have to be super precise with it. You know, it's as far as you want to take it. But the reason I enjoy it is because the pastel goes on there really, really nicely. So you can use a bigger brush if you want to. Let's do that. Where is it at? In fact, Linda, I didn't. I found that painting, Linda Moody. I found the painting that I did in your workshop. It's been a while since I had seen it because I had some flooding, unfortunately, in my home, and I had to put up so many things away. But I found that painting, and I just really enjoyed. I was like, oh, I enjoyed doing that underpainting. This is again watercolor. And you can see it. I can take it right over everything that I've painted already, or I can start chiseling out some shapes. Again, the thing is just to have fun and know that you're trying to create some sort of valley structure. Now this, I'm going a little bit dark because I know I tend to paint from dark to light. But I'm just finding that the more I paint, the less I get caught up with the details in the beginning. I do enjoy detail, but I'm trying to work a little bit more, like I said, like a sculptor, just kind of, you know, looking at the big picture, working the whole piece at one time. I mean, I do tend to hop around. That's that's something I, you know, these overs like embrace it. Yeah, it's okay. I remember I used to tease Margie about that, right? Remember Margie? I used to call you Skippy.
Yeah.
He used to skip around a lot. And he's like, no, that's okay. That's okay. I do a lot. I'm like, I know. I'm bad. Okay. So again, by laying some of this color down, you know what? Sometimes I just get these guys. these pelicans. All right, just kind of just start laying some color down to have some fun. Oops, that moved. Sorry, I banged that. These goosenecks don't work very well. All right. So again, you can, as long as you do it in thin layers, you can, and see what happens. Because I'm getting wetter with the media, you can see how it's starting to warp a little bit. I don't know if you can see that, but this is about as heavy as I would get with the watercolor. And then maybe I'd stretch the paper out, let it dry overnight, and it flattens back up. All right, let me give this a shot of with the blow dryer, and then I'll show you how the pastel goes on top of that. Really nice. And many of you guys already know, but this is the reason why I just really enjoy playing around with it, with watercolor. All right. Any questions, you guys? I'm kind of squinting down, just kind of looking at the way the feathers are falling. Sometimes I like to use a dry brush. Sometimes I like to use a really wet brush, but for the most part, on sheets of paper like this, I tend to work with a drier brush. So, or the pan pastel, or just a quick alcohol wash. Okay. Now, let me get a quick shot of air. We have about 10 minutes, you guys. Are there any questions? Anything you guys want to see last minute?
Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself, guys, if you'd like to ask some more questions directly to Otto.
So are you using watercolor as your painting? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Watercolor. Or for instance, if you wanted to do, let's do this. You know what? Let's do a blue and a brown. Let's see. For instance, if I wanted to do this is unison, very lightly, some blue, maybe this brown. And I just wanted to be, again, a little more expressive with it. Then I can take my big brush, where'd it go? I have it here. And some of that, I've got some alcohol mixed here. I've got some alcohol in a cup. And again, just lay it in.
Yeah.
But I tend not to let my paintings become too precious too soon. And I think that's the best lesson of all, is that by allowing myself to just play with it, paint, I don't feel like so uptight about the painting the whole darn way through, because the truth is, when I do get into the detail, I gotta be a lot more careful. But just having this stage of enjoyment, right? Or just allowing myself to be a little more expressive in the way I'm handling the underpainting, and to be able to work on the painting for a few hours, a day, two, whatever it might be, and just say, okay, you know what? The values are working, the forms are working. I'm well on my way, all right? Because as I tell the students, is concern yourself with value first, and worry about color last. So it's one of those things where I just get the forms down, because it really doesn't matter what color you've got on there, so long as you've got the value right, the forms right. And so you can see how that's shaping up, right? And I can take whatever colors I want, as long as I've got the form and I've got the values right. Again, between a wet brush, a dry brush, So that when, in fact, you know what? I'm going to take a little bit of, I'm going to take just a little bit of this light brown, maybe a little sienna, just warm it up. And I'm just gonna do this. I'm just gonna warm it up just slightly. Again, I'm not worrying. I mean, yes, it's getting a little bit muddy because I'm going a little too fast. But I'll just warm it up a little bit. So now that when it dries, the lighter pastels are going to really stand out on that. So I'm going to let that dry, and then I'll really start shaping up these with the pastels again, and I can keep playing with the mine charcoal if I want to dry, or I can take for instance, I can take my pencil, or pencil right here. Let's see, we've got a few minutes left. If there's any questions, I'm just going to blast this with there so I can show you what I'm talking about.
Before, I'd like you to explain to everybody a little bit about your workshop.
Oh, okay.
And what they'll be doing, and
all right, while that dries. So with my workshop, I'm going to be doing a workshop that's going to be on still life. Now, what I want to do different than from what I've done with other workshops where it's quite step-by-step is I want to be able to, anybody who wants to take the workshop, I would like to have a conversation with you prior to the workshop as to what approaches you might want to take. What do you want to build on? Because again, the same way I've built on a lot of different techniques, I want to share those with you. And if you're particular to one technique versus the other, please let me know, because we will have a materials list, but some materials will apply for some students, some materials will not. And so if you want to take the workshop, Maureen, do you want to tell us the dates again on that? Sorry.
yeah, it's
June 26th through June 28th. It's a Monday through the Wednesday. And we'll be probably putting out the notice about it either the end of next week or the beginning of the following week. And then registration would be a week after that.
Okay. And so again, it won't just be like a step-by-step or just strictly transfer. If you want to transfer your work, I'm going to then I'll show you how to do that. If you want to do something more like this approach, where you're drawing with a little charcoal or pencil and starting the stages like this, then so be it. I'm going to teach us how. Again, it'll be still life. It still has all the fundamentals to composition, structure, form, value, all that good stuff. But if there's a certain approach that you would like to visit, then I would love to have that conversation with you prior to the workshop so that we can establish that connection and start getting that foundation ready so that when you come to the workshop, you already have some sort of plan in mind.
And Maureen, tell me, that will be right after our general meeting, is that correct?
Workshop?
Yeah.
It's a 3-day workshop, so it'll be on a Monday through a Wednesday. I don't know what the date of the general meeting is in June. Usually they're earlier in the month.
Okay, we'll get that information. I believe is online under events.
So information should be under workshops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The general meeting is usually the second Saturday of the month.
So what I'm doing here, you guys, just real quick, is you can actually take a number 2 pencil back under it if you want to get some of those details in, draw some of that stuff if you want to, or you can start taking your pastel to it. So for instance, so if you only have a few minutes left, let's see, I think I have that walnut brown in here. You are. I thought I had you in here. I do not. Okay. Well, that's okay. I'm going to take a Carbothello. I thought I had my walnut brown in here, but this is a credit color brown. And of course, this is a Carbothello. I think that's a 635. And so you can, reestablish your drawing if you want to go that route where you reestablish your drawing, or you can just start putting the pastel, the softer pastel right on top of this. But I tend to go just, you know, get one more layer in just to restructure the drawing just a little bit. If there's anything missing, just to make sure that I've got my values down just a little bit better, or there's certain forms that I need to revisit. And, you know, maybe I want to get some plumage drawn in. And so, you know, the 800, I'm surprised about how, I mean, how well it takes some of these layers, considering, I mean, I do about 7 layers on this paper, and it works really nicely. So I'm super impressed with UArt as far as how it can handle even the finer papers, how well it can handle it, all those layers. So, you know, maybe that's why I think I really enjoy it. But yeah, I tend not to work on the rougher papers as much, but I should experiment with them.
Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, so now that's pretty good. So this is where I really start putting in the pastels, and so, you know, I see some. Sorry, I keep banging with my hat. I wear my hat when I paint because it blocks out the light. It helps me see the values a little bit better. Sorry, I want to move that just a little bit more.
Told Gail I go to church, but I can change that if I need to.
I can't. I'm sorry. What's that? Are we getting? Okay. So this is a bit, you can't see it on your end probably, but when I see the image, I see there's a pale pink right on the beak. And so this is where I start showing up quite a bit lighter on the camera. But now this is where I start weaving color. Where I'll take one color and kind of weave it into the next. There's a little bit of pink there. Again, my go-tos are these Giroux just because of their ease of, I mean, the way I can handle them really nicely in my hand. I can get these nice details. I can really start structuring the forms quite nicely. And I'm not too nervous about getting everything right the first go. I'm treating this a little bit more like I do my oil paintings, where I do first pass, second pass, third pass, fourth pass, right? Sometimes a fifth pass, just to make sure that I've got the right amount of detail that I want, that the forms and values are correct. So one of the things I really like to do in the beginning of a painting, and I know it's already 8:03, is that I really like to get a dark down and a light down. So I try to get some sort of, and I save my darkest darks and my lightest lights for the very end. But I tend to like to get some sort of, you know, squinting down, trying to see what's there in terms of the bigger forms. The detail will come later, but I got to get these layers down first. And so more and more, this is the way I work. You saw how I did that with the To Love and Light, and just enjoy being just slightly more expressive before I get into being a little too tight. So, you know, as they say, this is the awkward years of the painting, right? The awkward stage, where the adolescence of it, where it just got these growing pains, unfortunately. And so, but it takes some development, and I can take weeks, I could take months on a painting. But it's all enjoyable because, again, I'm painting at my pace, at my growth and my stage as an artist. And so, again, I just, I know it's done when the narrative is told, right? Where there's nothing more I can add that tells a story. So, you know, if there's any more questions, I'd love to answer them. Oh, sorry. I keep moving this thing around. And again, this is going to develop into quite a detailed painting, but I just want to really kind of help you understand why I like to do the underpainting. And again, so I've been criticized to, why do you go through all that trouble? Because it's me. I enjoy doing it. So, you know, if that helped anyone out, then I you know, I would love to chat with you sometime and see if, what kind of successes you've had with underpaintings. So let me see if I can go to chat because I haven't seen anything. So if anything, is there any questions? Anything? Thank you, Elaine. I love that. What's that?
I have a question.
Yes.
So say that you're going to develop this piece in layers. You get that initial layer of pastel on that you have right now. Like, are you not going to touch that anymore with anything but a pastel? Like, that's it? Is you're just going to keep pastel over? Are you going to like blend it different?
I tend to work. Thank you, Robin. I appreciate that. I tend to not to blend too much with my fingers. Not that I don't do it, right? I tend to weave the colors. So I tend to kind of like putting frosting on a cake, right? You lay it down and then you smooth it out. So I get layers that are thick enough, and that's when I decide to blend. So I don't like to blend when there's very little pigment on there. I get at least a few layers of pigment on there, and then if I blend, I do blend with my fingers. I tend to blend with my fingers. You know, you saw me playing with pastels, but that's typically the underlayer. But I don't do that on the second and third pass. Typically on the first pass, I'll use a pan pastel or the pan pastel tools. But typically, this is how I like to work. I like to get the bigger forms, right, and then I start noodling it with either pastel pencils or you know, just being very careful. You know, Brian Bailey does this. You know, Brian Bailey tends to start with like the harder pastels, which are the Rembrandts. He really likes the Rembrandts, but he doesn't use, all he uses is his finger and the pastels, and he does such a gorgeous job of that. But I tend to use anything at my disposal, but I tend to enjoy just weaving the color and just leaving that, it tends to be just a little bit more lush. And you saw that in camellias, where just putting the layers on. And for instance, let me see if I've got some pastel pencils here. So for instance, like if I'm really kind of getting the structure down, then I can start, you know, it's just almost like smoothing the frosting with the pastel pencils, where I can start playing with the details and go as far as I want to go. And the other great thing about using these pastel pencils on top is that I can use them. You see the point that I you know, I get pretty sharp with them. This one's a little bit blunt, but I tend to use it almost like a metronome. And so I do this movement here, and that tends to glaze or weave the color, you know, the frosting, so to speak, once I have all the layers. And it does become a little subtractive, but I'm careful about how much comes off, right? So, and then for the very last part of the painting, I'll use like the schminkas or the unisons, the very soft pastels for those nice, rich lights. So very much like an oil painting where my shadows are transparent, my higher key forms are much more opaque, right? So if you were able to take that cross section of a painting, you know, you would have the valleys, and then you would have the peaks of the lighter parts of the painting. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, so you don't be shy to blend. If that's what you like to do, if you use your fingers, do it. If you want to use a tool, do whatever you want so long as you feel good about it, right? Experiment. That's the only way you're gonna find out, right? Is to be a little bit fearless and get in there and just experiment. I like, this tends to be a study for me where I explore with the color, the pastels, the strokes, and then this painting might end up being much larger or probably the same size, but I've gotten all the frustration out and I've made sense of it by taking a day or two of just exploring what colors. And I write all this down or I record it and I say, oh, that's what I did there. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna cut that step out. I didn't really like that. I don't like the way that came out, or I had way too much trouble putting pastel on top of that because I put too much acrylic underneath. So I'm very cautious of, I'm very aware of all the steps that I take because it's very easy to forget, and at least for me anyway. So I like to journal all that. And if you guys,
so do you have?
Yeah, go ahead.
So do you have like a spiral notebook or something that you just put the title down and you just notes?
Can I show you guys that real quick? I know it's a little overtime, but I want to show you guys. So let me, I'm going to put it up on this camera over here because let me see here. I'll show you real quick. Okay. So, sorry. Can you guys see that? Look
wow.
Yeah, that's a lot of notes. That's for one painting. And let me just show you some, like even the recent one that I'm doing. Like this is notes on the, oh, can you guys see that? The notes on a painting from my son that I did of my son. Sometimes I take color notes. This is notes on, I'm showing these notes on just different paintings like the one I'm working on right now. There's, let's see. And this is just one sketchbook with all those notes on it, but there are times like, you know, when I was working on Polar Express, there's, where is that? Oh, this way. Just quick doodles or, you know, or like this one, all the notes that I've taken from workshops. I mean, it's just a lot. But the thing is this, that when I'm doing a painting, I really, here, let me read something to you real quick, if that's okay. And just so that I always I've documented everything. And I think what's helped is that when I work for Disney and I'm working on when I'm working on any project with Disney, we have what's called a drawdown card. And the drawdown card, in fact, you know what, I'll just switch this so you guys can see me. The drawdown card, sorry if you guys can see me. Anyway, the drawdown card is a documentation of every single paint and technique that we used on whatever surface we did. So if we're painting, painting a surface to look like rock or granite, whatever, then we have to document every single mixture that we did and every stage that we did. And so that when we leave the site and the Disney artists that come back 5 years later to touch it up, they know exactly how I painted that. And they will follow the steps to try to create that continuity. Now, same thing with my artwork, is that I want to know what I did with that painting if it was quite successful. Why did I enjoy that so much? Okay, now I remember. Because, okay, I used an MDF panel and I sanded and primed with 2 coats of color fixed rose gray primer. I cut with water, I applied it with a soft brush and sanded each coat. Transfer drawing using sienna brown new pastel, wrote on back of the paper copy. Original drawing was done on Durling film with 9H lead mechanical pencil. Used blue Prismacolor coal erase pencil to transfer to see what I transferred. On the face, I used a 625 Carbothello, burnt umber Carbothello to lay in after applying a few more thin layers of color fixed rose gray primer to hide sepia guidelines so that they are barely visible. So I'm always making sure I do color swatches, you name it. I just want to be able to, being primarily self-taught, because I was primarily self-taught, these notes have helped me immensely. They have helped me guide me through painting so that I don't have so I don't continue to make the mistakes that I've done before. So hopefully this is something you guys might want to do too. It's just journaling how you do your paintings, because it's really nice to revisit it a year later, 5 years later, 10 years later, and saying, wow, I've come a long way. I've really changed up the way I work.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Otto.
No, thank you. Thank you for joining me. Sorry.
Thanks, Otto.
You're very welcome. I didn't get to read all the chats and stuff, because I'm working on this iPad, but hopefully that's helped you out. Again, sorry you guys didn't get to see a finished demo, but I just wanted to really help you understand how much I really like to do underpaintings. So, you know.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you, Otto.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank
Really
you,
helped
Otto.
a lot.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Otto.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.